All right, I'm gonna kick off. All right. Um, I'm gonna rip into managers quite a bit in this talk. I am not gonna be nice to managers. So I would like to start off and say that this talk would never have happened without good manager and honest feedback, right? The entire reason that I'm giving you this talk is because many years ago, a friend of mine, a manager at Microsoft, called me and said, "Hey, could you manage one of my guys that works for me, right? Like one of my colleagues. Could you manage this guy? Sorry, manage. Could you mentor this guy for me?" And I go like, I have never mentored a person in my life. Well, if you don't count maybe teaching Git to people 10 years ago. And she goes, no, but you're the most satisfied software developer I've ever met. Like, and he's afraid that he's going to have to become a manager or his career will go stale. Anybody felt that before? Like, do you have to become a manager? Cool, almost 50%. All right. So I said, okay, you know what? Happy to do it for you because you're a good friend, and if you think I can do it, I will try and sort of answer your trust. So I prepare stories, I prepare words of wisdom, like a lot of words of wisdom for all the things that I can figure out that would be good to hear if you are a software developer afraid to have to become a manager, right? And because I worked for Microsoft at the time, he worked for Microsoft at the time, when she said mentor someone, I thought that meant, could you meet this person for a cup of coffee once or twice? No. This is an enterprise organization, okay? This means 12 meetings, 6 weeks of organized things with KPIs, mind you, that I have to meet now as a mentor. So anyway, we go through these 12 sessions over 6 weeks, and I get, of course, a 5-star rating from this guy, as you would from someone who isn't a psychopath after you talk to them for 2 hours for 12 times, like 24 hours. So, we packed that up, and a couple of weeks later, I'm at the head office, and one of my managers comes up to me and say, "Hey, I heard you mentored X, and oh my God, this thing you said, that's so brilliant." And I'm like, "Thank you." And in the back of my head, I'm thinking, I did not say that. I'm 100% sure I didn't say that. And then, like just a few hours later, another really high up manager comes up, these kind of people that decide what bonuses I get. And they go like, "Yeah, this thing that you said." And I'm like, "I'm pretty sure I didn't say that either." Of course, these people decide my bonus. I didn't tell them I didn't say that thing that they thought was brilliant. But now I'm like, what's going on here? So I called up this guy. Like, "Hey, there's a bunch of people telling me I said some brilliant things, but I don't think I said anything of any one of those things to you." And he goes, "Well, Karl, you see, your words of wisdom, bit of bullshit." And then he went, "But your stories, I learned a lot from that, and I took away my own things." So this talk is basically what he took away from my stories combined with my stories. And I hope you're going to like it. How many people are satisfied? So my definition of satisfied that we're going to talk about today is just you're content. You don't need anything else. It doesn't mean that you have to be overjoyed, mind you. Like, you don't have to be great. You don't have to be grand, but things are okay. And I think that a lot of the advice that you're going to hit today is going to be things where you feel, "Yeah, I knew that. Yeah, you knew that, but you weren't doing that." And I think if you feel that I knew that, I'd like you to sort of think about, well, why aren't I doing that? Anyway, my first job was as a phone operator for Swedish Railways. "Hello and welcome to Swedish Railways. From where and to where would you like to travel?" I said almost every day for an scrupulously long amount of time. This is the most boring thing I have done in my entire life. It involved basically 2 things: trying to figure out from where someone wanted to go to where, and being yelled at by people when there weren't ticket available. So I decided that I'm going to try and make this fun. Like, what would this job look like if it was fun? I need a challenge. I need something to do. How many people know what this is? Welcome to the Olds People Club. So this, for the people who don't know, is a dot matrix printer. This has basically a long ream of paper that's connected. So you can print 50 meters of paper if you like. And it has nice little holes on the side that it runs through. So nothing of that bullshit that modern printers do, trying to grab a piece of paper. No. This one will forcefully pull through anything, right? Every Monday at this company, we would have our statistics printed on this piece of paper. And for every % you were better than someone else, you can already hear this was a great place to work, right? You would get one line break above the others. So I figured out if I could really optimize my workflow, I could sort of get to the top of this list. And I figured out, okay, so there were actually short commands that nobody taught me in this booking system. Like, I can still today tell you the number that Stockholm, that Gothenburg, that all of Swedish cities has in that system. Because you had to learn them to be able to type faster. So I got to the top of the list. Then I noticed that, well, if I were a lot better than other people, now there were line breaks. Now there were a noticeable space between my name and other people's name. So I was like, could I get to another page? Like, could I have my own page if I was really fast? So now I had to figure out, okay, so one of the things that takes the most time is that our email client times out. And if you want to understand how old this is, we had to email every successful sale to the guys who printed the train tickets and then via post sent them home to people. Yeah, I've had 27 years of experience in this industry, okay? So I wrote a script that kept this email client from timing out. So suddenly, I was a lot better because I didn't have to wait 5 minutes between every call to re-log into our very poor email system. Okay, so then next Monday I come in, everyone else is on the floor. Because this one continuous ream of paper. And I'm up there by the printer. Needless to say, if this happened to you, you'd catch on, right? You would, right? So they came to me and said, like, hey, Karl, we know you're cheating. What are you doing? So I went through all the, the first things, like the quick commands and all the stuff. And then eventually I said, oh, yeah, and by the way, I figured out this annoying thing with the email client. So for all of you young people, this is a disk. We used to store data on this back in the days. So everybody got a copy of this. And, one morning, there's a suit-beclad man standing by my workstation. He's holding a disk like this that someone has very kindly wrote Karl-Henrik's script on. So it's, when he's then asking me, did you write this script? It's really hard for me to say, no, I don't know what you're talking about. And he said, well, this is a great idea. You obviously know what you're doing. You can start an IT on Monday. And that's how I became a programmer. Life was simpler in the 90s. But the thing that I want you to take away from this is, no matter how boring or how terrible your situation is, there's always something we can do to make it more fun, to make it more challenging, to make it better. We can improve the situation we are in, right? Problem with this job was that once I started with IT, I learned a bunch. There were great people. They had some people there who were very expensive, really hard to fire people in Sweden. So they started moving us around in different places in the country. So, I moved around. I've been living at 32 places in Sweden in various different cities. So after a while, some people started asking me, like, because I couldn't keep a girlfriend, it's very hard with friends, because you're always like moving around. Why don't you leave? Well, I didn't leave because I I was very bored, read the employee handbook. And that one said you get a 10K bonus every time you're forced to move site. I was making more from that relocation bonus than I was doing for salary. So, let me just say that reading your employer manual can help with your satisfaction. Now, my point that I'm trying to make is that your company usually has rules, and it does help you to know why they are there, especially if you're working in an enterprise organization, because there are definitely rules that will also benefit you. Like I worked for one, I'm not going to name the company, but I worked for one company. I mean, you can go to LinkedIn and see where I've worked, and they had a rule that if you were going overseas, you get to fly business class. You think your manager very often told you about that rule? Surprisingly, no. But if you are within a toxic culture, I would say today, I didn't get this back then, but I was young, right? If you are in a toxic culture, there is only one response to that: leave. If people do not deserve to have your brilliance with them, don't shine your light on them. They don't deserve it. But be smart about it. Like, if I have a job, it's easier to find another job. So job hunt after hours. Well, job hunt during hours. If they suck, you can suck too. And like, if you're in a toxic environment, there's no need to be afraid. There's no need for fear. You could just move. Like, if that new job sucks, well, the old one also sucked. So, fine. I also once interviewed a guy, and he had a lot of he jumped, for a few years, he switched positions a lot of the times. And he said this beautiful phrase when I asked him about it. Oh yeah, I was just looking for my next long-term fit. Can you taste that sentence? It's like any argument I had about him being a job hopper, gone. Because, no, I was just looking for you guys. Because you're good, right? The responsibility is suddenly on me as an employer to be good. Absolutely fantastic. However, I wasn't smart about it. I just one day said, I don't like this job. I'm just going to leave. And left. Moved back home. Is that a smart move? Come on. A little bit of energy. No! It's not a smart move. Luckily, sometimes all works out. So I had a friend of a friend. He had just started a startup that developed radio communication phones. So basically, really, really advanced phones that used handheld encryption, used by the police and a couple of other people. And he needed a programmer. And I was, one of the few programmers living in this area. Again, the 90s were an easier time. And this was a brilliant job for me because I got to do all the things that I loved. I got to work with radio technology. I got to program. I got to fly helicopters up on mountains to install software on air-gapped telephone systems. I mean, just saying that sentence is kind of nice, right? So I really, really, really love that. And I think the reasons that I got that job, that I was able to do that, like having a strong network, like knowing people, making sure that you know people, wherever you are, is one of those things that will enable you to be able to secure a job. Also, if you're struggling to find a job in the industry or with the specific things you want to do, she's from Perth, so she's going to know what I'm talking about. Like being the only person available to do the job that you want to do in a location might merit to move to that location. Like if there's a location where people do what you want to do, but there's none around, that might actually give you the shot that you're looking for. And of course, I was willing to go the extra mile. Like I didn't just want to code. I climbed 200-meter radio towers and installed radio stuff. I flew helicopters. I didn't fly them. There was a pilot involved. But that would get me to these places and, in wind and snow. It was absolutely amazing, a lot of fun. I got a ton of cool stories. Would I do it now when I'm, middle-aged? More than middle-aged, but anyway. No, of course not. But, when you're young, have fun. All right, so I had a great job. I'm satisfied, right? Completely satisfied. This is actually one of the jobs that I sort of regret that I left, because I think I would probably be running that company today. And I blame all of this on saber-toothed tigers. So you see, when we were younger, Stone Age and a little bit before that, we were genetically programmed to be scared of things. So when we don't hear a sound. You can try this if you're home alone one day and there's nothing going on in your house whatsoever. This works really well if you're a parent, because we have never heard that sound. And we start to get fear. We start to be afraid that something is wrong because there's nothing to be afraid of. Therefore, I'm afraid. And this is actually programmed to us as a security thing. And it's quite good to be aware of this because, when you are suddenly afraid of something, when nothing is wrong, just take a deep breath and realize that, okay, fine. Nothing is actually wrong. But your brain can make you do stuff like avoid risk when it's safe. Anybody ever wanted to switch a job but felt, my current job is kind of okay, don't want to rock the boat? Yeah, about 20%. Ever reacted emotionally instead of rationally? Come on, you're Greek. Seeing patterns that aren't there? Yeah, being a little bit jealous maybe of someone that just, goes out, these kind of things. We can see there's a million of these. And I really think that contributed, because I was very satisfied. But to be honest, I moved to south of Sweden, and I used this and try and rationalize why I did it, but also I had my girlfriend in that city. So, that may have contributed. But what I want you to take away for that, if you're happy where you are, yeah, staying around is great. However, I want to warn you about staying too long in one place. What is the longest anyone here has been in a company that you don't own yourself? 20 years? Anyone more than 20 years? Does Dennis win this round? You up there, how many years? 8, okay. Dennis wins. But the thing is, I have a friend of mine. He worked for the same company for 27 years. He was dead sure he would retire in that role. He was super satisfied. He loved it. Everything was perfect. Last year, he got fired. He had no network because every single person he knew worked at that company or in that organization or in that group of companies. So he had not a single person to turn to when he suddenly lost his job. So what I'm trying to say is that there is a danger of staying too long in the same company if you're not also working on your networking and options and making sure that there is actually something to do should the worst thing happen. I'm not sure if you're getting the whiff, but I'm not super enterprise friendly. Okay, so I moved south of Sweden. I have no job in an unknown city. So, of course, I go in and I start looking at all these pages of, is there work available? I found this job ad. We're looking for a programmer. I've done C and C++ programming up until this point. I had never heard of the programming language C#. Never in my life had I heard of this programming language. I was using Linux on my laptop. I was very Microsoft unfriendly. You may call me incompatible, as many Linux distributions are with Microsoft laptops. So I just thought that this little hash sign that they used was a very funny way of writing C++. Maybe it's Borland, I don't know. But I went into an interview and they're like, oh, you're great. Can you answer these questions? And they wrote some stuff on a whiteboard and I'm like, yeah, I would do it like this and I would do that like that. And it turns out that, if the guy who's interviewing you isn't that great at C# and you're answering things in C++, they have a really hard time telling that you don't know shit about what you're talking about. So I got a job as a senior .NET consultant. Let me put it this way. My colleagues, on the other hand, very quickly caught on. I think this is probably like I went from being very satisfied and very comfortable in what I did, knowing everything, like I've installed every single item in the previous job I have, and suddenly I don't even know how to install the IDE. Like I was so in over my head that I sat in the bathroom just, deep breathing and trying to, what am I gonna do? Okay. So what do we do when we're not satisfied? Like, you can't be under the water 100% of the time. So the first thing I realized that if I want to keep this job, I have to identify something I'm good at that these guys are not good at, so I can teach them something. Turned out that that was source control. They had never used Git. Git was fairly new at this time, right? They were terrible at source controlling. They preferred TF. Okay, for the old guys down, because there was quite a few of us. They preferred Team Foundation Services over Git. I heard that gasp. So I did that, right? Because that gave me a little bit of breathing room. I could feel like I was contributing. And of course, I asked for help. I went to my manager and said, hey, I think someone made a terrible mistake. I'd really like to stay because I think it's a pretty cool gig, but I don't know C#. And luckily for me, he just went, I didn't do this directly. I started adding value first. And he went, yeah, I can see that you're adding value. We'll buy you some books. All right. Then after that, what I went into was just, what can I actually do? Right? Where do I know? Because they were doing a bunch of Windows Communication Foundation that was cool at the time, okay? And I didn't have a clue, but they were also doing some sorting algorithms and some very basic stuff. And I'm like, hey, I can do that. That I can do. So I broke it down. I tried to figure it out, like, okay, where do I fit into this ecosystem? And I started to get the hang of this. But if you're in over your head, that can be an absolutely terrible place to be. And I think the things that I identified that would make me feel satisfied and valued in this case was, I was mentoring junior programmers. I got to learn C# because I was looking at the code and I could ask them a question, what does that mean? And how do I use that? And what is that in C++ terms and that sort of stuff? And then they got to learn, algorithms, debugging, source control, that sort of stuff. I was forced to speak at their lunch and learns, which nobody wanted to do, about what I've learned about .NET that month, which I do feel was a bit of a punishment, but also, hey, look at me. I also were very, very allowed to rock the boat. Like if someone was doing something that I would say, hey, I think this is ineffective. I think we could do this better. I think we could automate that. I had a really strong manager backup to say, yeah, you know what? Do that, to the point where they would send me to their most complicated customers and go, why don't you rock that boat? So I had a lot of fun with that. And of course, I knew electronics, so I could provide unique skills as an IoT developer. And yeah, this got me into being satisfied and feeling valued. So now you're all thinking, I hope, are you suggesting that I quit my job, move to a completely new place for a semi-successful relationship, take a job for a programming language I'm not qualified to program in to stay satisfied as a programmer, right? Of course not. I'm just trying to say that even if you're satisfied today, there might be benefits long-term to taking risks, even really stupid ones, especially if you're young. This goes down with, the number of kids you have and I was about to say the number of spouses. I think the risk goes up the more spouses you have. But you get what I'm saying. All right. When a conference has after parties, do you go to conference after parties? Awesome. So I would highly recommend that, because that is the sole reason I'm standing on this stage. I went to the LeetSpeak conference in Stockholm. I had a couple of friends of mine who said, hey, we want to go. Do you want to go? John Skeet was there lecturing. He was one of my C# heroes at the time. Absolutely brilliant guys. I was like, absolutely, I want to go. I picked him up in my car. I'm Swedish, so it was, of course, a Volvo. They decided that they were going to spend the entire 4-hour trip learning to sound like Chewbacca. So, needless to say, I was a little bit miffed when we arrived. Also, we were a little bit late to John Skeet's talk. So I ran in, looked at the talk. It was absolutely fantastic. I still remember it today. Talked about Noda time. Great talk about all the complexities about daytime. And there was a lot of other really brilliant speakers at this event. And I was like, wow, I was just blown away by how they acted on stage. They got laughs, people were interested, people were leaning in to hear more, right? I was fascinated. So I was sitting at the conference after party with a couple of Polish guys, and I said, you know, I could never do that. And they were like, why not? Why can you not do that? You sound like an interesting guy. And I'm like, what are you working on right now? We talked a little bit about IoT, and they're like, okay, cool. Here's a Jägermeister shot. And that kept on. They're like, what are you working on? What are you doing? And we talked technology, and we discussed, and then, hey, here's a Jägermeister shot. I woke up the next day more hangover than I have ever been in my life. And I am a professional conference speaker. And I had an email that said, hey, how lovely of you to offer to speak at our conference. Please submit your CFP to this address. I have only 2 problems. Where in the world is this conference? Who is this person emailing me? What the hell is a CFP? All right, it's fine. I found some friends who worked in tech speaking and, that sort of stuff. I figured this out, and I found a true passion of love, right? It has given me an absolutely fantastic network. I think I wouldn't have, if I didn't, value their sanity, I wouldn't have to get a hotel room anywhere in the world. Like, I get to travel. I get to go to Greece, for God's sake, and talk to you guys, right? And I get to learn from experts. Like, today, I've been just sitting in various rooms here, hearing about all these new cool tech stuff. And it's just so amazing because it keeps me relevant, even though I'm growing older. So this is one of those things, right? If you go to conferences, do you only go to things you already know? Or do you also go for some sessions to figure out what is it that I don't know, or what is it that I could learn? How many people have picked up a new JavaScript framework the last 3 months? That is worrying. None? How many people have picked up any new framework the last 6 months? Okay, a bit better, 50%. And eventually it all worked out. I learned .NET. Actually, I became a Microsoft MVP in C#. So I got to do a ton of .NET, and I consider myself fairly good at that today. Surprisingly, though, today I'm shit at C++. So you can be satisfied and take risks. But let's talk about managers, because that's what we're here for, right? We are afraid of becoming managers. I see managers as a mythical creature that can both approve your vacation, yet book a meeting during it. So remember the first sentence when we started this lecture, right? My colleague doesn't want to become a manager. He's anxious that it is required. This is nothing new. If you go back to Egypt, you will find scrolls describing that in 4,600 years ago, you had people that were deducted food because they didn't want to become the manager of the stonecutters. Like, he was such a good stonecutter, but he don't want to teach that skill to other people. Therefore, we deducted his food. This is 4,600 years ago, when someone was afraid of upwards mobility. By the way, also, the Drunkards of Kufufu is one of the names of one of these teams. To me, that sounds like one of the DevOps teams at work. But we sort of get to there's something called the Peter Principle that you may have heard of. Basically, is a person will be promoted until they become an incompetent person. Or sorry, a competent person will be promoted until they become an incompetent person. Have anybody heard of this before? Yeah. I'd like to shorten it to the programmer version. But the problem is that the Peter Principle is created as a joke by a New York Times reader. If you go and look up the origin of the Peter Principle, it's a joke. It's a satirical piece of writing, and it's been cited in so many research papers that it's frankly a little bit worrying. And I think also it's because it's not a satire anymore. We have all seen this happen, right? I've definitely seen people be promoted to a level where they're no longer competent. So let's talk about this. I don't want to become a manager. I'm anxious that it's required. Why is it required? There were some people who were afraid. Why are you worried? Usually, this is the sentence I get when I ask that question and I'm mentoring someone. It will hurt my upwards mobility. What the fuck does that mean? Right? Well, it means one thing. I will not get as much money as I could have. Right? Because that's basically what you're saying. Okay, there may be a few people who also want to have the title of manager, but you're not going to be afraid of being a manager at that point, right? So, we're talking about making money. So let's get into that, right? For me, to be satisfied, I can do fun stuff. Like whatever I think is fun, I get to do some of that at work, or I can develop something at work that, works with my system of fun. I make enough money. And that may be different from you, it may be different from me. Like enough money for me is that me and my family, we can go on vacations, we can live at a decent place, we can save for retirement, that sort of thing, right? For me also, I want to be relatively sure I won't lose my job. I don't think you will ever find me personally at a startup. Because I want to be able to know that my next paycheck will most likely come, right? It makes sense to me. And I have some form of security should I lose my job. Like I'm fairly sure I would get a new one fairly quickly in an enterprise organization. Should I need one? But have you ever thought about what satisfaction looks like for you? What does it actually mean? Like what do you need to be not happy, not, over the moon, just content? What do you need for it to be okay? So a lot of people ask me, well, okay, I want to stay a developer. How do I show my manager that I have value? I just sit there and write code all days. So these are my three standard recommendations. I just usually create a newsletter. It can be group, it can be team-wide, like whatever did we do this week? Because there's nothing that architects and managers is going to complain about, they're going to stop complaining about, which is that I have no idea what's going on in your team. We're like, we have tickets, there's Jira, I guess, or something, and you can go and read that, and he's not going to go and read that, right? So, doing a little bit of a newsletter, which is today with AI tools, super easy. So that's something you can do. You can just simply be a communicator. You can be somebody who shares a little bit of information. What can we do? Also, don't underestimate your value. I'm a person who writes code. Great. Are you the worst person to write code? Are you part of a good team? Can you sell that? Yeah. And of course, mentor others. I love mentoring people. I was a gold mentor at Microsoft, which requires something enormously of paperwork. But it's still, because it's kind of fun. And nobody will ever, you don't have to be afraid of this. Nobody will ever force you to become a manager. Caveat, a warning about going to conference after parties. I went to a conference after party and met a young man named Michał Vuszak. Michał worked for a really cool company called 1337. And I said to him when I was there, that sounds so cool, all this stuff you do, all the things that you describe sounds absolutely amazing. Do you think that they would like to work with me? Like, I want to stay at the place where I am, but would they be interested in working with me? And he went, maybe. So he gave me a phone number, call this guy, and I worked for a huge enterprise company, right? So I'm thinking, I'm going to talk to Mike, the middleman, right? So I called up this guy, like Dennis was his name, and I went, yeah, I would like to stay in this place. I would like to, work for you guys because you're doing cool stuff. And he's like, sounds like you would like to start an office for us. Okay, great. Let's meet tomorrow. Turns out I'm talking to the majority owner and vice president, the CEO of the company. So, sometimes all you got to do is ask. I thought they were going to say no, but, meet Karl-Henrik, the manager. And I had a lot of fun. I got to build up an office. which is if you ever get the chance to build a mid-level consultancy office in middle Sweden, do take it. It is barrels of fun. I got to hire all the best people I knew. I got to drill holes in the roof to mount projectors because I learned that that's something that people normally take in electricians to do, and they cost a fortune. I got to buy so much IKEA furniture. But after that was done, I realized that I loved solving the problems. Like, that was my programmer brain. I get to solve all the problems. Like, where are we going to sit? What type of computer should we have? How do we keep people happy? Who should we recruit? All that. And suddenly, I was just a manager. And, I was talking to people about, like, oh, I'm unhappy in my marriage. And, because, I even had one customer called in and said that a guy didn't smell so good. And I was like, I don't want to have that conversation. So I realized that I'm not a good manager because I don't have the skills to be a good manager. And I don't want to develop the skills to be a good manager. So if you do try to be a manager, leave quickly if you suck at it. So to be a good manager, you have to learn new skills. You have to pick up these new skills that you don't have. And that's fine. If you love it, if you want to do it, you can pick up these skills. They don't seem to be too hard, judging from some of the people I've met in management. But you will also forget all these important stuff that makes you a good software developer. Because if you spend 2, 3, 4, 5 years learning about management stuff and you come back to JavaScript development, you're not going to recognize the language. So, if you don't really love it, move away from it. That's my recommendation. Because you might, as many of my friends have, end up doing something you hate for the rest of your life. So I couldn't, no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't find someone to replace me, or who wanted to replace me rather. And they didn't just want to allow me to recruit externally. So I left. I talked to, like I said before, it's important to have a big network, right? So I went to my network, and a friend of Microsoft said, yeah, we need an evangelist, and you like speaking, so meet Karl-Henrik, the technical evangelist. So I went to work for Microsoft. I got to speak at so many places. I did 36 conferences a year at my worst year. I had 156 travel days on average for several years in a row, which worked really well up until the last picture down to the right there, when I started to become a dad. Because then you suddenly, for some reason, want to be home. Now she's 9, I would love to go back to traveling. Microsoft taught me the most important thing that anyone can ever learn. How many times have a manager said to you, are you making impact? Anyone heard that before? You have to make impact, you should make impact. Microsoft taught me what that means. It means statement, claim, proof. Like statement, automated testing speeds up software deliveries without sacrificing quality. Claim, by running tests automatically, whatever code change, developer can catch bugs early and release features full. Proof, and so forth. If you put the things that you do in this format, then you will be, you will using the Alexander Dordovich, which is the guy who taught this to me, framework for showing impact. And I've taught this to every person that I've ever mentored, and all of them are really high levels at Microsoft today. So they're doing quite well for themselves. So I would really recommend using this. Here's another example. I contributed to the largest deal for companies' earnings in Q2. Like, even if you're a developer, right, or you're someone running workshops, you can say, by running the delivery things faster workshop, we got Acme Inc. to sign as an enterprise customer with 200 seats. Sander, the sales representative, directly quoted the CEO saying that the DTF workshop was key in the decision to sign with our company, right? Suddenly, we have moved from, I did what I was supposed to do, to, I'm actually delivering value. So I'm running out of time, so we're gonna end very soon. But I'm just gonna say I was extremely satisfied working for Microsoft. I think at some point in my life, if I get the chance, I will go back to Microsoft. But as I said, satisfaction isn't always forever, right? I had a young daughter who I love above everything else, and I wanted to be home more. I had spent almost all my life working with software architecture, and I got a call from a company in Dubai who said, hey, we need a software architect. You don't have to travel anything. Just be at the office a few days a week, and we're good. So today I left Sweden. I moved to Dubai, and I work as a software architect in a job that doesn't really require all the other skills. And that might sound weird, right? But I was satisfied at Microsoft. I was extremely satisfied. But we also have to remember that satisfaction can change. Because just because you 10 years ago decided that if I can get this job, if I can get this salary, if I can do this thing, I will be satisfied, doesn't mean that 10 years later that is going to be the same thing. You have to remember to reevaluate the fact, am I really satisfied? So I'm going to leave you on this, that I have been extremely lucky in my life. I get to do what I want. I get to go to conferences. I've had really good jobs. I've made a lot of money, to be honest. And I think the reason that I get to do that is because I talk to other people. I build my network. I do take a little bit of risk, but also, some calculated risks. And I would say, go and talk to people, build your network, create something, and then you can be a satisfied software developer, and you will still have a chance to be very lucky. Thanks for listening. If you wanna get in contact with me, you can go to my website where you have my LinkedIn and my Twitter and all the other stuff, and my email. If you want to talk about something, I do try to mentor people, but these days, usually, if you want to be mentored for free, I usually just do it with students and young people. If you would like to move to Dubai, which seems unlikely in this current situation, we are looking for senior developers. Thank you very much for listening.